you guys for coming here on a chilly, what's it, still autumn, eh? Autumn morning. And I think this is just the start of many more. We had one a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to have a few more. And it was oversubscribed, meaning that we've had more interest in this one than we've had that we could accommodate. You can see the place is big, but we can't accommodate really more than 30 people. So I want to welcome you. The program has changed slightly. Brendan has said that he would do his hive inspection first for the winter maintenance. It will feed in better into the feeding side that's going to be presented later by Jeandré. So we're going to give everyone a chance, like maybe 10-15 minutes to suit up, and then Brendan is going to get ready and we're going to go around here. Brendan, you're going to come and say a few things first. The two hives is just behind here, so it's not far. It's just another couple of meters up the hill. Just behind the grey building over there. Brendan, you want to say a few things before we start? Yeah, just keep this because we're making some. Keep this. It's Mike.
Oh, I thought it was one of those vapes. A few things. I don't normally say a few things, and normally there's lots of questions. So let's make us interactive. I know I've had a few questions fired at me. I actually prepared some notes when I was first asked by Silla about 2 months ago, just so that we try and cover everything. But this is not. Do I have to talk into you? No, my voice articulates nicely. Or are you recording? Oh, okay. Can you hear me better now? Excuse my back on the back here. So this is a winter preparation workshop. It's not a spring workshop, so we won't be putting foundation in and stuff like that. So normally this work we would do from about March up into June, but it's almost a bit late in June. We want to prepare the hives for winter. But basically what this is about is it's like putting your bees to bed for winter almost. It's like wrapping them up warm and wrapping them up tight so that they're safe. Winter, we generally, I'm talking from my perspective, I'm a commercial beekeeper. We run 2,500 hives, so a lot of the stuff is for what we do, but I've tried to also cover basics. A lot of it's common sense, guys. But winter is normally the time when the bees have a break from the beekeeper. You know, we work them quite hard for the rest of the year, so winter time we try to put them leave them alone for quite a long time, because all the beekeeping work is really stressful on the bees. You know, working them, opening them, all of that. So they need a break from that. And with this cold weather, we do a lot of other work that we need to do as commercial guys. A lot of planning. You know, it's not last minute planning beekeeping. You need to have all your stuff together. You need to have equipment for the season ahead. You need to have your frames ready and foundation ready and all of that. So it's planning. And then my guys, I've got staff, so I have to keep them busy. So we're in the workshop and we're repairing all our broken boxes because I don't like leaky boxes and front boxes. And we're building frames and we're busy putting foundation in and all of that. And then all our equipment, we have to dip it. So old equipment will be re-dipping, and then all the new stuff we dip. We like to dip in candle wax. Candle wax is a lovely product to dip in. A lot of guys use Waxol F. I prefer candle wax morning because we can dip today and use the box today even as it cools off. Jeandré does a lot of contract dipping for the guys with candle wax and Waxol, depending on what you want. I personally prefer candle wax because it doesn't release any undesirable chemicals in that, and I believe an oil-based product like Waxol, firstly it leaves your equipment dirty, and every time you carry the box you've got brown on you, and you need to air it, I believe. And I also think it leaches out undesirables. I'm sure I've noticed it in honey from new equipment. So I prefer candle wax, and I'm digressing a little bit, but we do our dipping in winter, and then we repair vehicles. Go through the vehicles back to front and do all the tightening and all the other stuff that goes with vehicles, which work really hard. You know, beekeeping work is hard on vehicles. And then we take honey to sites and we go thank all our site owners for for letting us keep our bees on their farm and accommodating the staff in and out and things like that. We send off our wax for rolling. Dani Forster at Overberg Honey, his dad Pete, does a fantastic job for rolling foundation if you guys have got wax. And catch boxes. I don't catch bees, but winter time's the time you prepare catch boxes. I'm sure we've done a workshop on catch boxes. Have your frames ready, starter strips in, propolis in your boxes. Propolis is the best attractant for catching swarms. It's a spring thing, catching swarms, but propolis, you know, the guys have got all these bee lures and things like that. I'm sure Ahmad makes some.
Propolis is
with
the key
all
ingredient. Propolis is the key ingredient.
Propolis is the most natural thing in nature that is going to attract bees to a cavity. You know, if a swarm dies and the wax moth comes in and cleans up all the infected comb, but there's always propolis left behind. So the bees are very attracted to propolis. So we'll be preparing catch boxes, which we would probably place out in mid to late July. You can put them out and the bees will start swarming depending on how the year goes from then right into later in the year. And as commercial beekeepers, we rely on pollination, so we go and see all our farmers and chat to them about the coming seasons and their requirements and things like that. And of course, we don't have a lot of time in the year to focus on your honey sales, visiting shops, designing your labels, all indoor stuff. You can sit where it's cozy behind your computer with a heater on your feet, and I'm sure the list of winter work where you can't get out and work the bees in the crap weather. How's it, Eddie? That list is endless. So let's get on to the subject. Why check bees and what are we doing? Why are we doing winter work? What's the winter work about? Why are we having this workshop? I think it's really important. Most important about the why is starvation, I believe. There's very few man hours in a day for a bee, or woman hours, to work bees when we've got this cold weather. There's also there's not a lot of forage often, unless you're lucky like Ahmad with all these lovely proteas flowering around that can feed his bees. So starvation is always my concern. Last year, we had this long July, cold, wet weather, and we put our bees in the canola, and I really got a massive fright because they were so starving, and I was stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, and it was touch and go. Bees die from starvation. You know, they die, and you come to a hive and the bees are stuck in the cells, all their heads, and they've died because they haven't had food. With the minimal food, obviously there's less or no brood in the hive. So starvation, how would we tell starvation? It's the weight of the hive. The other things we're checking for when we're doing our winter is insulation on the hives. That's what your lids are there for. You know, there was a question on the discussion groups a little while back about lids. I think it was on the mentorship group. And what's a lid there for on a hive? It's to keep the bees insulated. You want to keep them warm in winter. It's cold. If they're not warm, they're eating up more of their honey reserves to keep warm. So we want a really nice insulated lid for winter time to keep them warm. And in summertime, it's bloody hot when it's 40 degrees and the sun's baking on the hive. So we want to keep the heat out. So insulation is really, really important. Also, if you have poor insulation and your lid is cold, the bees are permanently breathing, and you've got this evaporation of moisture which condenses onto the lid, and you've got droplets on your lid and it drops on the bees and they get cold. We don't like leaky houses with buckets all around and cold, so the bees also don't like a leaky, wet, cold hive. Winter time, well, most of the year it seems at the moment is a problem for badgers. We don't get to our bees as often, so we want to prepare our bees for badgers. We need to go to the sites. Maybe we're not even opening hives. We're checking for vandalism. We're checking that trees haven't fallen over on our hives. If you're near a river We've had 2 years ago, we had massive floodings. Last year was also hectic floodings, and the hives get washed down rivers. Hey, Herman, that whole area, the guys lost hundreds of hives that side. So it's always these are all considerations. And then winter time, the roads are wet. So access to your sites is also a problem in winter time. These are all just considerations. So inspections in winter time has to be for a purpose and a reason. We're not just going to go and open hives and crap in the hives. It's cold. The bees don't like being opened in winter. So everything we do with the bees when we open a hive, it's for a reason. Firstly, it costs money to drive to sites. It's a long drive, there's fuel, there's wages, so there's the costs of that one has to consider. If you're going to go to the bees, why are you going? There needs to be a reason. And as I said, the inspections are disruptive to the bees. Opening hives, smoking the bees, put stress on them. So we're trying to give the bees a break from the beekeeper. So if we're going there, it needs to be for a reason, and we want to cover all the bases. So in winter time, we might visit the hives once a month just to check on them, and we might inspect them only once, and we try and do all our work in that one inspection, and I believe sooner is better than later. Sooner because we've got warmer days, it's starting to get colder and colder, and we have less opportunities. You guys work maybe in the week, and you only got Saturday to go, and it's raining the whole weekend, and you can't actually do an inspection. Temperature, cold. So we prefer a nice warm day. The reason we don't want to work bees in the cold, there are reasons for it. It's not just that the bees get cold. The frames are all propolized together in the hive. The propolis is an amazing stuff that we need in the hive, but when you come and work bees and it's freezing cold and you try and work in your hive, everything is so fuss and the propolis is so hard that when you're starting to, even take the lid off, you start to break stuff. And you start to work frames and you pull a frame out and the bloody top bar pulls out and you go, again, we've all had top bars pulling out and it's so frustrating. You're trying to repair a bloody frame on the site and knocking it in. So wintertime when it's cold, it's really rough on your equipment and possibly unnecessary. Also, your lid is nicely sealed in winter. The bees have propolized it up nicely and now you crack the seal. And so there's room for the warmth to escape. The other problem with opening bees in the colder weather is they get very aggressive and defensive. And that's, they get grumpy and they're unpredictable. And then you've got people nearby or animals nearby, livestock. It's all considerations. Are you going to open hives in winter and cause a big problem, shut down the whole area? So one has to take all these things into consideration. So be prepared, guys, when you go to the bees. Make sure you got your protective gear. Make sure you got your smoker, fuel for the smoker, your food for the bees if you're feeding them, and extra equipment. Always take extra equipment, especially if you're driven far and you're like, oh shit, I needed this and I needed that. So try and predict what you're going to need, and don't just arrive on site. Oh, okay, we needed actually supers because there's fynbos nearby and you've driven 100 Ks and you didn't take supers with because you didn't anticipate it, and then you have to drive there again with the extra cost and your time and trying to get the right weather. So when I say be prepared, you also need to check that you can get access. As I said, winter time, the roads are really slippery. Do you have a four-wheel drive? How are you going to get in? Has the river washed away your roads? Has the farmer plowed his fields and he doesn't want you to drive there because there's all new seeds? Have you moved your bees away so you have access later in the year? So those were just some considerations on that. So now the what? What are we doing? We are going to the site. We want to check the bees out and we're all excited. We got new bees, or we're new to beekeeping, or we are experienced. can tell a lot about what's happening externally. Before we may not even go into the hive, but externally we can look at a lot of the factors around the hive. I think microclimate is very, very important. So where's your hive positioned? In summertime it's really, really hot, so we're trying to get it under the trees. And as the sun goes north in winter, we actually would like the sun to warm our hives up, so the bees use less of their reserves to keep warm. So positioning of hives, ideally, when you're setting up your apiary sites, it's a consideration for summer and winter. You'd like them to be on the north side of the trees. So if we're looking at this lane of trees here, we'd like to put the bees not on this side, we'd rather put them on that side, so they're directly underneath. In summertime, the sun's above and it gives them shade. And then as the sun goes north in winter, then the sun will come under the trees and keep your hives nice and warm. So we're going to look at where's the hive positioned. We can see the bee activity. We can just watch the bees. How much activity is there? Are they coming in with pollen? How busy are they? The next thing we can tell is whether the bees are hungry, almost from picking up the back of your hive and just feeling its weight. And you can gauge, and with time you start to realize how much weight the hive has, and then you know if they're starving or if they're hungry just by hive weight. So in winter, we want to keep the hives off the ground, guys. We want to put them on some sort of stand. The ground is cold, it's wet. If your equipment's sitting in that, equipment absorbs the cold and the wood absorbs the moisture and starts to froth. So if we can lift it on a stand, get it out of the long grass. The long grass is cold and wet, and if the bees fly in and they hit that wet grass and they're all full of water, not good for the bees. Or cut the grass. Lift them off the ground, guys. Even a tire. But if you put it on a stand or wherever your hive is positioned, it needs to be sloped forward. Let's just use one of Jeandré's lids. You know, if it's sloping backwards, when it rains, the water lands on the floorboard, it runs inside and it sits as a big puddle in the back of the hive, which is nice and cold for the bees, not ideal. So we want to put like a 2 centimeter block, just lift it up a little bit. Put it on a slopey ground, lift it up a little bit. So when the rain comes, it just falls off the front, runs off your lid and down out of the hive, not into the hive.
I also find that precipitation that you were talking about earlier, that they naturally generate from the heat inside the hive, it then runs along the lid and down and out the entrance instead of pooling inside your hive.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, exactly that. If your hive's level, as Scylla said, then your condensation, the water drops, sits right above your cluster. Even if it doesn't run right off the front of the lid, at least it doesn't fall on your cluster. And then we can also see, shit, the lid's leaking or the box is fraught or broken. We can look at our equipment. Key, we need to look at, have we got enough insulation? And you can see other problems like ants. Or you can see that a tree's fallen over, or you can see all this is quite common sense, this stuff, but I'm just covering it all because sometimes we forget these things. So if it's a nice day, we can do an internal inspection. There's not many flowers around in winter. So often you haven't got a lot of bees, you don't have a lot of brood, you're going to find less brood. But what are we going to look for inside the hive in winter time? We're looking at, have they got enough honey? You felt the weight, you're still not sure. We want to look inside the hive, have they got enough honey? A really strong swarm, if they confine to a hive for a long period of time, they consume the most of your reserves. So your strong swarms, you actually want more reserves in the hive than a slightly weaker swarm. A strong swarm would be 9-10 frames covered in bees. A weaker swarm would be 4-5-6 frames covered in bees. So internal inspections, as I said, the bees shut down in winter. They're the queen's not laying brood, there's no food coming in, there's no stimulation on the colony to brood up. The colony's not expanding. If there's no brood, if the queen is not laying eggs, they don't actually need pollen or pollen supplement. They don't, what they need is they need a carbohydrate. They need sugar, honey, or something. They don't need sugar. Let's use that number 2. They need honey in their hive that they can eat through the times when they're stuck in the hive. So that's what we're looking for in the hive. We're not going through saying, oh shit, there's no pollen. We're looking to make sure they've got enough stores in the hive. In America, where the bees are confined for 3, 4, 5, 6 Canada months, they feed their bees solid with sugar water to get them through those lean periods. And by February, March the next year, when they open their hives, especially the strong ones, they find they've got nothing sometimes, and it's a big stress. I don't know if you guys watch any of the YouTube clips. I'm sure most of you do. The Canadian beekeeper, you see how he stresses sometimes when he can't get to his bees and it's frozen and bees are starving and stuff like that. So they will pack in, they call it 50 pounds, but 20, 30 kilos of stores on their hive for their cold weather. So honey or carbohydrate is the most important thing we need to look at for the bees. And if the hives are light, like I found last year, we need to feed them. Feed them. They will starve, as I said. So how much do we, when we open the hive and we're like, okay, Brendan said, well, we need to check if there's honey in the hive. How much honey must there be in the hive? As I said, a small colony will use far less stores. So if it's 5, 6 frames of bees, 2, 3 frames of honey will be adequate for them, unless we have a long cold snap, and even they can chomp that up also quite quickly. But if you've got a 10 frame colony of bees, you want 5 frames of 5, maybe even 6 frames of food to sustain them. I put in some notes for myself.
Do you need a brood frame or do you need a super frame of honey? So what you mean by
I am going to just double check if I added something in. I'm talking about brood frames. I'm talking about in the brood chamber itself when we're talking about everything we're talking about now. Supers are something I'll cover just now. So we're talking about brood frames. Yeah, you want the honey down. Your colony, as it contracts, is going to pull together. It's not going to sit on the top of your super where there's nothing. It's going to probably stay in the brood chamber. If you're using queen excluders especially, they're going to hang out with the queen. So we're talking about full brood frames. A brood frame will hold about 1 kilo of honey or stores. So we're talking about quite a few kilos. Look, our Cape winters aren't as harsh as the guys overseas who in snow. And our bees do get time to fly out, but we still need to give them food for the cold days. So as I said, we need about 3 frames on a smaller colony that's covering. I had a box with frames in, but when you open your hive and you look at your colony, straight away as you take your lid off, that's when you assess how strong it is. Because when it's cold, or when you use your smoke, they run down, so you can't actually assess your colony strength. So as you pop your lid off, bees are covering 7 or 6 or 10 frames, or they're full up, or they're into your super. That's how you assess your strength, and then you will assess what your reserves are. I hope I'm making sense, guys.
If you have a 9 frame strong brood box going into winter
Of bees?
yeah, you would want to leave them a super with at least 6 frames of food.
I would want them to have in their brood chamber 4 or 5 frames of honey, maybe even 6 frames of honey. Or we can put a super on, and I think I've got super covered. If I don't, then we'll go back there.
Okay.
So if you want I covered the amount of sugar to mix, but if you want 3 to 5 frames with food, and if let's say you've got nothing, you need to, we're going to cover it later, but you want to have to feed them between 4.5 to 7.5 liters of thick syrup. It's not small quantities of sugar we're feeding, because once they take the sugar out of the syrup and you work it backwards to how many kilos it is, and a frame holds a kilo, and you want to provide 5-6 frames of reserves for them, it's a lot of feeding. You know, we're not trying to make ourselves feel good. Oh, I fed my bees a liter of sugar water in a bottle, and then you come back in 2 months and they've starved. A liter is just so little for bees. We're talking about large volumes when we feed, and I think it's a misconception that people think they can put 2 liters of syrup on and they've done the job. I think it just makes them feel good. Oh, I fed my bees, you know. Obviously, when you're feeding large quantities of... oh, good. I'm sorry, you guys have still got my back to you. When you're feeding large quantities, they don't clump it all in a short time. It takes them some time to consume it. And with time, there's always that possibility of the syrup fermenting. So we put a preservative in. I use a very natural preservative that the food industry uses called natamycin. I like to keep it as natural as possible, and it just means your syrup lasts longer. The bees don't like alcohol too much and fermented syrup. They'll consume a little bit, but it's not healthy for them. We're trying to feed them sugar water if we are feeding, if you find your hives don't have enough. So that's the shutdown work. If we're not using the bees in winter time, there's no need to stimulate them and make them strong. We're actually leaving them alone. So we're going to feed them we're going to make sure they've got a lot of honey to get them through the cold weather. For us commercial guys, myself, Herman, and one or two others, we actually do berry pollination in winter time. Berry pollination means that we need colonies that are up to the standards of the WCBA. And to achieve those standards, we need to also feed. We feed a different syrup to get the colony through the colonies that are not going to pollination. We're going to feed a thick syrup because we want them to store it. But as pollinators, we feed a thin syrup. The thin syrup tells the bees there's a nectar flow coming in. The queen lays eggs and we can have more bees. WCBA standards are quite challenging to meet at this time of the year because the shorter days, the colder weather, keep that queen laying brood, keep enough brood for the standards challenging. We'll feed 2-3 times 4, 6 liters of syrup to keep them stimulated and keep them up to strength. We can't charge a pollination price and we don't give them the correct standard. So it costs us money. Feeder types, Jeandré is going to discuss it, but we've got internal feeders, we've got top feeders, we've got bottom feeders, we've got bottle feeders. There's many different types. Jeandré is going to go through a little bit of that, and we'll all support him with our different ideas as we go. So I don't want to talk too much about it, except that when we're feeding bees, do it carefully, guys. Don't spill your sugar syrup everywhere and then the bees are robbing, and it encourages ants and that. Do it carefully. The problem with feeding bees, if you've got open feeders inside the hives, is that bees are not very good swimmers. They don't. So if you got they didn't learn backstroke and breaststroke and crawl. So put floats in your feeders if you've got open feeders inside the hive. It may be just a super on top of the hive with an ice cream container in it that the bees can go in and access the syrup. Put something in there that floats. Some people put wooden blocks. I've been using bubble wrap quite successfully, and it's quite cheap and easy to work with. It floats nicely on top. Bees can walk on it. If they do fall in the syrup, they've got something to get onto and to shake off on. You can just picture the bee like a dog shaking off. The food aspect is really, really important for the bees in winter. Something that we don't really talk about enough is American foul brood disease, or we know about it, but we don't actually talk about it. If we're opening hives and we are doing a massive take apart of the hive, it's worth looking for American foul brood disease, but you only find that on brood. So if the queen isn't laying eggs, you're not going to find much brood. So the chances of you finding AFB in winter are slim, but there's always that consideration looking for diseases when we work bees, guys. Become familiar with the different signs, the different symptoms of the clinical symptoms are what you can see. Don't worry about the diseases you can't see, but look for the diseases you can see. American foul brood disease is our biggest concern, really. We don't have a problem with Varroa that you watch on the YouTube clips. That's their biggest concern with the European bee. Ours is AFB. But also become familiar. You'll see chalk brood maybe. You'll see other little anomalies.
We are having a bee diseases workshop in July with Brian van Sale from
Dalred.
Dalrad and Mike Alsop, and I actually expect every single member to attend. It's going to be at Elsenburg. We're going to have if you keep bees and you're not at that workshop, I'll be super disappointed.
Yeah, it's
I'm
irresponsible.
actually reporting. No, I'm just saying it's an important workshop to attend. It's the only way to fight it and to keep everyone's bees safe.
It's irresponsible if you don't know your bee diseases, and most of you probably don't know your bee diseases properly. Sorry to be judgy, but it's really, really important. You know what AFB is, you know what you're looking for. Even if you don't pick it up in this inspection, you're going to pick it up in your spring inspections. And it's very selfish if you're not prepared to look for it, because you're going to affect the whole surrounding area. Any wild colonies, any other beekeepers. So
I expect you to.
It's a very important workshop to go. We need to do it every few years as an association to teach all the new guys, to remind the guys who've been in it for a while and maybe a little bit rusty on the facts.
Charles Salmon and Mike and them are also then working on a roadshow for that same workshop across the Western Cape. So if you know other beekeepers in other areas in the Western Cape, sharing the other workshops and the venues on the WCBA group, please share them. Even if they're not a member, please share those workshops with everyone that you know that is a beekeeper, so that they can learn. This is the most important thing for you to learn.
Jeandré, can you go to my back here? I put a strapping tool on the passenger side. Thanks, man. It's turquoise. Foundation. We were speaking about foundation earlier on. We don't put foundation in the hives in winter time, guys. Your foundation gets the bees will only draw foundation, which is the reason we're putting it in the hive, on a nectar flow or on a syrup flow. There's no real nectar flows for the girls to draw out foundation in winter. If you put foundation in the hive, it creates a barrier in the hive, because we're not going to put it on the side walls. And that's a cold barrier. The bees can't keep it warm. There's no insulatory capacity of the foundation. So we're not going to put foundation in winter time when we're doing these inspections. I know you guys want to have these perfect brood boxes with lovely... Thanks, man. Is there a buckle on you?
Yeah.
Ah, fantastic. Thanks. So I wouldn't advise that we put any foundation in winter. Even for Herman and myself, we're not going to put foundation in when we're doing berry pollination and that. We're going to leave that for springtime, when there's a lot of veldblomme and canola and stuff like that, to put foundation in. So foundation, it's not going to be drawn out. It's going to be in the hive in a frame. It's cold, it's warm, it's cold, it warps, the bees chew it away, and you end up with a beautiful sheet of a wax sheet that's not in beautiful condition when the bees actually start working on it. So no foundation. Supers on, supers off. I did remember it, and it was on my notes. I was looking everywhere. I should have put my glasses on. I don't leave supers on my hive in winter. Even my strongest hives, I shut them down. We use these nice deep lids like Jeandré. There's nothing. The reason we don't leave our supers on in winter time is I want my cavity to be as small as possible, so it's easier for them to keep warm. A lot of people leave supers on in winter time. It can work, but for me it's easier not to have supers on, because when my springtime work comes along, I can get straight into my brood box. I don't have to remove a super and a queen excluder. If I need to move my bees from all their sites into the canola at the end of winter, it's far easier for us to move a hive this size than it is a hive with an extra super on. So we take all our supers off and we store them. A lot of people are concerned about wax moth and storing bee equipment. How do you store your bee equipment so the wax moth doesn't get in? Wax moth doesn't thrive in cold environments. And wax moth doesn't like the light. So we try and create a cold environment where the sunlight can get in. So we will generally stack our supers, not our brood chambers, not our empty brood chambers, but our supers, we'll stack them, stagger them like that so that the cold air can get into them, bit of light can get into them, and we're not creating a cozy environment. And we put them outside, and we'll just we've got tons of supers, and we'll stack piles and piles and piles next to each other, and we just put corrugated iron over the roof. Keep the rain out, that's all we want to do. Wax moth doesn't grow in our supers at all. Our brood chambers, we do something different. We'll normally, we've got loose floors, we don't have fixed floors. So we'll put them on the end so that the wind can blow in from the bottom of the frames and from the top bars of the frames. So we don't use any special chemicals. We don't wrap them in bags. If you're very lucky and you've got a big cold room, you can freeze your supers, and that kills all the wax moth eggs. Yeah, supers in winter. Scylla was talking about honey, leaving honey on the hives in the supers. It's a very good practice. So if they don't have enough in the brood chamber and you've got on top, it's also suitable for the bees to feed. Honey has another function in the hive which I haven't discussed. The structure of the hive. In nature, keep it, always go back to nature. What is honey in the hive for, apart from to sustain the bees? We were talking about insulation. Honey is a very, very good holder of heat, so it doesn't conduct heat very well. So the structure of the hive, the way the bees live in nature, is they surround themselves with honey, and that's why when we open the hive, you'll always find honey on your outer frames, or your outer sides of the colony. When you do a bee removal, your honey's on the outside, and then the bees put their honey on top of a colony living. So a super full of honey would hold the heat very nicely if it's full of honey. I think if it's not full of honey, it doesn't hold the heat.
Yeah, I take mine off. The supers that are empty,
You take them off and you shut them down also.
yeah. But the hives that are strong, so I try and build up my hives that I can constantly have 2 supers on there, so that when I then in winter go and do this work, that I can comfortably leave a super that has already got
Reserves, yeah.
But it's for insulation, because I'm up in the toy store, it snows there. That's fine.
There we go. So the honey is a great heat trap, a heat sink at whole. It keeps the colony warm also. So that's why we also don't put a frame of foundation next to the honey, because that insulatory effect of the frames is gone now because you've got an empty frame that's just cold. So supers on, supers off. I think if you're not moving your hive, you can leave your supers on. For a guy like me and Herman, we would probably take them off. Yeah. Unless there's honey or a honey flow coming on. We don't need that extra space at that stage of the year.
I definitely would not. I don't leave the super on if there's nothing in it.
Yeah.
Because then it serves no purpose. Then it's just an extra space. And it will not serve an insulatory purpose, like you say.
And you get more condensation on your inner lid.
So then I take it off. The key is if you're going to leave it on, it has to have food.
There you go. So we're not doing much more than looking for reserves in the hive. I know especially when you start beekeeping, you're so curious and you want to look in your hive. You want to see the queen. And so sometimes you can't resist looking in the hive in winter time and you want to have a look. So there's not much to do apart from look for stores for the bees, I believe, and make sure that your equipment is watertight and make sure that you've got insulation. So when you go to your bees, you might take a piece of polystyrene foam. We're talking about insulation. What is insulation? Insulation is a lid that's thick enough to retain the warmth of the hive. And there are many ways to do insulation. You can use that isofoam. What's it called? The stuff the green stuff they put in roofs. Isotherm, that's the word. You can make blankets out of that and put it inside plastic sleeves, and you can put that on top. You can use polystyrene foam. You can just use a nice thick piece of plywood. 18, 22 more plywood will also work really, really well for insulating. So when you're finished looking in your bees, you're going to put your Dexol on. One word of Afrikaans in this whole talk. My apologies, my Afrikaans is not my strong language. But before you put your lid on, we want the bees to actually seal the lid on really, really well. So we'll take our hive tool and take off these high points of propolis. And on our lids, we're going to scrape them clean, get the propolis off so that they fit nice and tight. And we're not going to open this hive for a while, and so a lot can happen in winter. You've got a strong wind or you've got something, so we want to keep it safe. So I would suggest putting a strap on the hive, quite frankly. But if you don't put a strap on the hive, at least a nice heavy rock to stop your lid from blowing off, to stop the hive from being knocked over. So I just want to show you how to do the straps. What we do, we just use these little wire buckles. They've got a top side and a bottom side. You get different types of buckles. I like this woven strap because you can reuse it quite successfully. And if you look on the WCBA website, there's a video on this. I don't know if you've seen it.
That little buckle thing is a Houdini on its own.
That little buckle thing.
Ages to figure out that thing.
Have you got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
But it took me longer than a year to figure it out. I had to call my mentor every time and say, how? The one day I called him and said, I'm struggling for 5 minutes. How the F do I get this thing open?
How to get it open afterwards or closed?
Open before I wanted to start working. He put it on. He said, if you struggle too much, just cut it. I said, yeah, I did.
There you go, and just tie a knot, exactly. So we did there's a little video on the WCBA website under the members section on how to work with these buckles. But basically you've got one fixed end and you've got one sliding end. So we'll pop our strap on in the middle. These straps don't work against badgers, by the way. You need to use chains or you need to use some serious wire to stop the badgers cutting it. They've got such strong claws. But we'll just pop our strap on. And if you want to have a really nice strap, we made these tools. We came across this thing many years ago. It's called a Zulu tool. It's quite nice for self-defense in the bakkie. You can keep it next to the seat if you've got anything happening. You can use it for a hammer if you need to repair frames. You can use it for many things, but this is our strapping tool. And this gets our straps really nice and tight. They're almost as tight as your frame wires. So it's quite a lekker tool to use. You make it. If you want it done right, do it yourself. But now the question is, how do you get the strap off in your next inspection? Because that's...
Like tight like that, it's a bit of an issue. Yeah.
You have to get it tight, because when you pull it tight, the strap, the buckle gets pinched against the strap and then it doesn't slip. If you don't get it tight enough, it's going to slip. So you just have to go the reverse. If you just follow your strap through, and you just follow it back again. So we take it back, needs to go underneath there. There we go.
I'm sorry, not a fork, no ways.
There we go. Simple. Simple.
Yeah, no, definitely.
There we go. Through the bottom. Pop it forward. And then you can reuse it and reuse it. I have done that 1,000 times.
The best way for me, if it starts like that, I put my hive tool under it and I lift it like as if you would to pull the lever backwards, like with a ratchet. That kind of thing, that's how I did. No ways.
It obviously wasn't tight enough.
I need a Zulu. I have a Zulu dog, but that can't do that.
A Zulu dog?
No, I have a poodle. His name is Zulu.
Oh, I see. No, this is...
I have a different Zulu tool.
Okay, so we're going to clean off the propolis. We're going to have insulation. We're going to strap it up nice and tight to keep the rain and the cold out, and badgers, hopefully. We're going to check that the hive is sloped when we finish closing the hive. Supers, no supers, that's another consideration. If they're not full of honey, as Scylla said, take your supers off, take them home. If possible, stands for badgers. Check for ants, put some ant remover down, whatever you call it, to keep the ants away.
As a commercial beekeeper, what do you do against badgers? You can't put thousands of hives on stand.
I'm not very tall, unfortunately. I wish I was a little bit taller. How does that song go? Come on, sing it. So badgers are a huge problem for me. Flip, I think I lose most of my colonies to badgers. We ran 2,500 hives, maybe 100 hives this year. I didn't even keep track anymore. It's just so many. So badgers, as Nick said, how do we protect against badgers? And the most effective way to protect against badgers is to get them off the ground. About a meter, 1.2 meters off the ground. But I can't work hives so high. But badgers can climb. So if you use a wooden pole, they're going to climb up the wooden pole. Ideally, you want to use a metal pole that they slide on. Put a pole in the ground, build a framework that your hive can stand on. That's the first prize for badger prevention. Problem for us also is to set up a site of 48 hives or something. That's a lot of cash outlay for poles, framework, and all of that. But if you're losing 100 colonies a year, maybe I should consider it more. But for a shorty like me, I keep my hives on pallets. Can I just demonstrate? Can you bring a second one? Oh, it's not necessary actually. We'll just talk it through. Yeah, thank you. So I quite like pallets for all of my beekeeping. All of my beekeeping is done on pallets. Firstly, the hive sits slightly forward on the pallet. You can drop the front of the hive off. I like these floors like Jeandré. The pallet's a nice height for me to work at, to work down here instead of trying to work in the hive up here. You can work down here. You can get on your knees when you much after working 100 hives. and work on the pellet. The pellet, we can strap the hive onto the pellet. I use chains to protect against badgers. So we'll slip a chain around the hive, and they can at least put it at a bit of an angle, and they can strap it onto the planks. I can put all 4 hives on the pellet, so one here, one looking that way, north, south, east and west, and we can chain all the colonies together also this way, because those badgers are absolutely amazing how determined they are, and they dig deep holes and they try and come in from the bottom, and they push and they pull, and those woven straps aren't actually strong enough. They'll just rip it with their claws.
As a chain, very effective.
Yeah, very, very effective. You can just chain it over the top, or you can chain it around and over the top.
It doesn't try and bite through the wood or anything like that.
They do. They do. Yeah, so it's not 100% foolproof. And what we even do, because we've got 4 hives, we put another pellet on top, so he can't come from the top and rip your straps and pop your lid off. So there are quite a few considerations with the badger. It works quite effectively for us on pallets, because you can't really come from the bottom with all the slats of a pallet.
It's probably going to be an incredibly stupid question, but I know that in the past when people used to put black bags out on the road, they come with cayenne pepper and just shake it on there because they say it's the most off-putting smell and irritates. Like, is there not something that one can put onto the boxes that, although there's something tantalizing for the honeybee, there's such an off-putting smell surrounding them?
Badgers are really territorial. I believe if you walk around your apiary and you pee around the circumference, I believe that's a deterrent. But you know, if your dog's always stealing food off the table and you put some cayenne pepper, he's still going to steal it.
Yeah.
Because
I'm just wondering, is there nothing that can be like a repulsive smell or something for the...
I don't know of anything. I'm open to input from the rest of you guys. Okay, so we strap it up tight, we slope the hive. Yeah, that's basically it. But as a member of WCBA, I just want to remind you all that you must register with DALRAD. I do believe that it's definitely beneficial to be a member of an association, so we can have meetings like this and share a lot of this important aspect of animal husbandry and keeping the bees. But this stuff must all be positive. It's for sharing. It's not just to keep it because you've learned a little trick of how to put your foundation in the frame and you think you're amazing and you don't want to share it with Herman and myself or whatever. I think this sharing is really important for all of us. Ideas, you've all got different experiences, you can teach each other. Online contributions, the WhatsApp group, use them, guys. Let's share on the WhatsApp groups. They're a little bit quiet at the moment. I'm sure there's lots to talk about. So let's use them. Let's have positive contributions. And let's build our industry. Keep building it. Make it professional. We do things right. We look after the bees right. We respect the properties. We don't leave shit lying around. Broken hives and straps and plastic bags and stuff like that.
Don't start fire.
And partake in these events. You're going to learn what Silla was saying. Come to the disease workshop, please. That's how we can all become better beekeepers, and we can become friends. And come to the AGM. Come to the Sabio Beacons. Get involved in the industry, guys. I think that's the last of my rant.
Sorry.
Please, questions.
I thought you were going to mention the ICB cage.
Ah.
People use that thing.
I built some. I thought I was really clever. I don't know why this is there, but it's just since you brought it up. I thought I was having a vandalism problem. So I took these cages as a vandalism deterrent. And I built a nice framework like a pallet for the hives to sit on. And I built a fancy system for closing it that you can't open it unless you've got a long socket. And I put it over my hives. And this is perfect for badgers. You can build cages also, you're quite right, to protect your hives from badgers. But from people They just burnt my hives and stole the cages. They sold the cages. They couldn't get to the hives. They stole the cages.
The sheets that they use in the concrete foundations. No. You get a sheet that's already welded.
Yes, weld mesh.
You know that one that I'm
Yes,
talking
yes,
about?
yes.
You get like that thing you had that Zulu tool.
Yes.
It bends with that, and you make it in a square. And then the good thing is, this is what I've seen first. In summer when it gets really, really hot, they put a couple of slats and then they put tucker on it.
Can put shade cover on it. Eh? Very nice.
Just put the tucker that's loose and then they put the
But if you take one of these things and turn it upside down, then the base of it already gives you that shade. And then you just have two people to pick it off.
What also helps nicely for shade is the wine farms, those plastic sheets that they put on the pellets, that basically fits on top of that. If you put that on, that also helps nicely for shade.
No, we were just talking about, so you got to do it the cheapest way you can, you know. So I think 6 meters by 2.4, something like that. The concrete sheet, the formal one.
Reinforcing.
They sell it for, I think 380 rand. So I mean that's quite a bit that you get for very little money.
I think Nick did something like that, didn't you guys? Hey?
Depends and it does that, but if you brace it a bit, yes, you get it 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever.
Vandalism.
Like your Zulu tool, that's exactly what
So,
they use basically.
yeah.
It's what it looks like it.
I've seen them bending it.
Bend and you make your square
So-
and then it stands like it and the pins, you know.
So I think for badger proofing for natural predators, it's fairly easy and not complicated to make something safe for the bees. With human vandalism, their ingenuity is far more than the honey badger can do. So they will do more, and you need to do more than it's actually worth it to protect it from human vandalism. In human vandalism, I found, from speaking to other beekeepers, is security tends to be your best bet. Early alert system, so whether it's a camera system that can send you a notification, and not having your bees accessible with cars or buckies. I know it makes it harder for you to go and work your bees, but if it's in a remote location, then it tends to be less. But vandalism is a bigger threat to really mitigate against.
But I must say, I didn't actually, look, I've only been in the beekeeping thing since November, and I didn't actually realize how big a problem, this is just ignorance, like how big a problem vandalism is. And when I started talking to a couple of farms, and I was quite surprised how many were so eager to have bees in their farm. But they would tell me, listen, we'd love to have your bees, but we cannot in good faith let you bring your hives here, because in 1 week those things will be buggered. And I thought, what kind of horrible bozo will come onto a farm to do that? And he said, no, it's the farm kids. They'll throw the hives broken with bricks and then come and collect the honey.
And it's a big dare, and see who can get stung the most.
It's not even like it's the farm kids. It's like the kids that are there.
But these sort of cages are fine against farm kids, but when they are a bit older, teenagers and young adults, then they come up with a plan, as Ahmad was saying. They're going to get in there.
The portable angle grinder.
Cordless angle grinder.
So I made some with rebar, with gaps about squares about that big, with a sliding lid that more or less that size that you can fit 4 colonies in. It was a particularly bad vandalism site, but with really good nectar. Cost me about 4 grand per cage, but in the last 4 years it's
Can I just ask a question around baboons? So one of my apiaries is right by the mountains in Paul, and the farmer himself was saying that what Cape Nature does is they obviously trying to manage the baboons in a way that they don't hurt them, and so they take them from one place and drop them in other places, which obviously means that there's other farmers also tend to shoot the main male
alpha.
baboon, the alpha, and then all these young baboons will come up and they'll kind of do all these new things. So isn't there a way that the association can talk like an entity like Cape Nature to also ask them to kind of how they manage the baboons in a way that it doesn't hurt us as beekeepers and other farmers too?
I've seen, sorry to interrupt, but here at Manus, at the Kiefroek, we had a lot of baboons that were roaming there and
Yes.
making some good stuff. We put hives there. None. Not a baboon in that.
The baboons are not a massive problem.
Yeah.
They're not like badgers that can handle these things.
Well,
They're like,
Yeah, but what they did was the farmer had bees and I added my hives there, but they'll disrupt, so they'll throw the boxes
Push them off.
over, yes.
that's why you need a Zulu tool and some of that strapping.
I guess so, but I was more asking about the association, kind of reaching out to Cape Nature to ask them how they manage, because at this area, the baboons in that part is a bit hectic. But anyway, I was just wanting to ask you.
I think it's a valid point. I didn't
As
cut.
a body to speak to, because obviously they want all animals need, a place to live, and
Yeah.
I can't like say the bees are more important.
What I can say from Cape Nature's side and from not just Cape Nature but all the national government nature conservation bodies, they don't want managed hives on any of their properties.
Well, this is a private farm
Yeah,
owner.
so Cape Nature doesn't care what happens to managed hives.
They don't.
They don't care what managed to, because they don't want managed hives. If there's wild bees in a tree, it's wild bees. So for Cape Nature and any government, because I had hives in a gullis in the national park, and they don't want bees there. They don't want managed bees. They said if there's wild bees, so for them they don't really are interested in mitigating anything. If it's nature, if nature does it, they're fine. If it's people on the other hand, they might step in. But for them, a baboon knocking over a hive or climbing in a tree and destroying bees, to them they say that's nature. Nature must take care of itself.
Sorry, no, Cape Nature, we all know Cape Nature. So, me as having a piece of ground that is private ground, even there they have a say, because
Yeah.
we're on the biosphere, and they don't allow commercial beekeepers. They don't allow any commercial operation. It's your ground. It's 20
Yeah.
hectares. They will tell you you can have one hive per acre and no more than 4 clustered, meaning a pallet there, and then it must be the next lot must be 125 meters from there.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm saying, they have these rules, and if you don't abide, they've got loyalties, man.
Yeah. So it's definitely we can engage with them.
Yeah, you can. There is ways
As an organization, we need to engage with them.
That's
Even
a-
us with a private
Cape
ground.
Nature's a long conversation.
Yes.
It's a long
It's a
conversation.
long conversation. Even if you have private ground, they will say the bees can also be an invasive species.
This is, yeah.
Which we have noticed, honestly now, guys. You know the blackbird?
Yeah.
Drongo.
You know that one. So there's certain things and certain times of the year they tell you the story with the mosquito and the what do you call the helicopter that we call that other thing, and
Dragonfly.
if the bird becomes too much, it becomes a problem for that thing, and that thing becomes a problem for that thing, and then we have an imbalance in the ecosystem. Sorry guys.
So,
Cape Nature, that's
yeah.
what I think.
I've got a nature conservation, that's what I studied, so 17 years of nature conservation. The issue that conservation authorities and guys like Sandbox and Cape Nature is around the natural character.
Yeah.
So they are constantly looking at the balance.
Yes, that's exactly what the guy said, That bird comes in, that takes that thing, then the mosquitoes become a problem, that becomes a problem afterwards, and it's like that.
So that is something that if you are going to keep bees close to those kinds of conservation areas, I have the same issue. I'm up in Toyston. I'm literally in a heritage site. I was just lucky enough that the landowner has given me permission. But yes, baboons. My bees are active only from around 11 o'clock in the morning.
And they stop at what time? 2?
Lazy buggers.
I'm sure they stop around 1 probably. Gosh. Anyway, so they were these beautiful boxes that looked very inactive. And yes, so the brandwacht would jump onto my box, and then suddenly you realize when there's a whole bunch of bees piling out of the box that, it's actually a bee. And in the attempt of jumping off the box, every time I would get there, it was literally a monthly occurrence. I would get there and 3 of the hives would be lying on their sides. bees still inside them.
We've also done the same thing.
But that stopped immediately. There's an old on the property. There's an old one of those growing tunnels, just the looped frames, and it has a basic game fencing mesh on it. I just moved my hive into there. It immediately stopped because the baboons are not going to go into the tunnel. Problem solved. So sometimes it's a simple solution, strapping them to both, because essentially they were jumping on top of the box.
So that's why we visit our hives once a month, just to check on them, even if we're not opening. But that comes to the end of my sort of theoretical, or just the stuff that goes behind it. We might open the hives just now. It's so cold to open the poor bees. But before we do that, one of the committee members, Jeandré, Voges, is now prepared this long presentation for us about feeding bees. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jeandré. Yes.
So between the frequency, and I leave it a bit slightly higher out of the ground, and this tapping
we knock rebar in on all four sides of the hive, and we wrap the wire across, ground it higher and serve it higher, and tied up with that. It's been, there has been activity, but they haven't been able to open it up. And I also drill my boxes closed. I attach the super to the strap.
Jeandré. Ja.
Drill it in and have the time to chew it. Not get into that.
Okay, morning guys. Brendan covered a lot of my things. I just want to talk about the sugar and the feeding of bees. So nectar is a sucrose, and sugar is also a sucrose. If we look, we specifically must focus on refined sugar, not unrefined sugar, because refined sugar is sugar that is being processed to remove all the impurities, where unrefined sugar could include molasses and other minerals that could end up being harmful for the bees. So now Brendan,
it's actually the harmful, but it's a lot of ash in the other products, like molasses.
Molasses,
like
yeah.
A lot of, as Jeandré said, it's undesirable stuff.
Yes.
So don't feed them like apple concentrate syrup that comes from a canning factory and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You really want the clean sugar.
It costs a bit more, but it's definitely worth it. And then we were speaking earlier about feeding. Don't just feed to feel good. You can have two strategies with feeding. You have the winter feeding, and also the second one is feeding for stimulation of the queen. So your winter feeding is a much thicker syrup, which is about a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts sugar to 1 part water, or you can go to a 1-to-1. And then there was a study regarding stimulation feeding of a Bangladesh university, where they came and they've worked out regarding the table is that your best stimulation comes from a 1 to a 1.3 ratio sugar syrup. So it's a 1 part sugar and 1.3 3 parts water.
That's 43% sugar.
Here.
43%. Distillation. So you just do it by weight.
Pardon?
Are you heating the water up beforehand, or hot water, cold water, lukewarm?
Personally, I buy syrup. It's already mixed syrup, so I don't heat anything up. But yeah, you want to also be careful for fermentation of the sugar, especially in the summer times. Because then we can look over here. We have different kinds of methods. Because you can either have your frame feeders, where I don't have that here now. I don't use that. And then you have your bottle entrance feeders. And then you have another option with like these kinds of lids. Is that a?
That's a top feeder.
Top feeder, okay. Okay, and in here, this is a 32 more hole that's been drilled where you can put a 2-liter Coke bottle inside. And the Coke lid, you put about 3 holes just so it forms a vacuum. And it ends up, like the bees drink at the bottom and it drips out. So that you can put on the top. The problem with this can be ended up fermentation in the summer because it can get baked if the bees like to propolis the lids closed for some reason, and then what happens is it starts to like ferment inside the bottle, and that is also can be harmful for the bees. Then we have also the other option. Instead of a bottle is you use like meat bags, vleessakkies, and those you place on top of the hive where you take I use a uncapping fork, top of the frame, you use an uncapping fork, and then you just poke the uncapping fork holes inside, and the bees go and drink on top. You put it face up, not down, otherwise all the syrup runs out. So there's 2 options. It's these where I have this is a 40 ml. So I used to use those lids, but then they also end up whopping. So then I changed over to a 40 ml wood, let's say lid pieces, and this also gives 2 benefits. Is you can put your meat bags on top of your frames, and then you put this lid on top, and then it doesn't because that ends up squishing the packets down, where this gives a space that the bees can still move on top of the bags. And it also helps the more space. So double benefit of also these is the traveling. It also gives a better ventilation because the hot air rises and the cold air sinks. So it's more space for the bees. And also another benefit of more space in your lid is if you're a bit late at your box, the bees normally fill this also with comb before swarming off. So just a bit of a buffer. So that's, and then you can also do with the hole in for the bottle. And then you have these feeders here. This is Brendan's flagship. So these are lids that open up here where you have this is a bit of an older version, but you have the bees come up from the bottom, inside the box, they come up from the bottom, and then they climb over this wood and go inside here. So I have this bag in here because there's 2 different ways. Some people put in, if you can seal it properly, they put in the syrup, like pump it straight into the lid. And then this also helps the bees don't drown. So this floats on top of the syrup, and then it's like a place for the bees to walk. And then these are the bags that I was talking about. You can fill these bags, and then so the bees they can come up here and onto here, where you also, another option is where Brendan was also explaining where the wood, like the 2 wood where the bees climb under and then they drink. So that's
the second baffle in, so that the bees only have a small bit to go in, and they can't go in here. As we said, the bees don't swim very well. So sometimes with these lids that I found with mine is they come over the top and they're so excited that they just jump in and they do a double somersault, and then they
Doggy paddle.
Doggy paddle. So you do need a float inside it. Pine needles, straw also works really, really well. But the new design is we're putting a second baffle in, so they only have access to a 1 centimeter gap here, and then they can't land up in the syrup. Myself, I don't have a pump, but we will fill this feeder full with syrup right to the top and hold 6.5 liters to whack in the syrup, and we try to stimulate them for pollination.
Yeah. I see people can do that.
Sure, they can do it in 4 or 5 days. They can really suck it down.
And
Is there nothing else to use besides the plastic bagging?
it just works the best for me.
You can put an ice cream container in here or a plastic bucket, one of your mom's Tupperwares. You can pinch it and use it.
Yeah.
Because Silla was just saying they eat the plastic too.
Yeah.
And you only want
Yeah.
small holes in that Coke bottle. It's like a panel pin size. You're not drilling a 3 mil hole in it.
And then, yeah. Yes. Physically open them. Yeah. They won't open it again. They close it up. Yeah.
Drill it. Just make new holes.
This one. Yeah, I don't use. I leave the lid because I've moved over to using these spaces. Yeah, that's ideal. It's just that I have so many of these ply lids that I reuse them to put the strips on to as I change my feeding system from there. And then also another thing regarding stimulation feeding is that you don't want to put everything one time full and then you're done. You want to stimulate a natural nectar flow. So where you feed and you come next week and you feed again. So you want to create a flow of the nectar instead of just dropping everything on them and then you don't follow it up again because then it doesn't stimulate that flow. But that's in the springtime. But for the winter time is you are wanting a thick syrup to feed them up so they can have their store in for
You want them to
winter.
store it. You don't
Yeah.
want them to consume it.
Yeah.
The thick syrup they'll store. They're probably going to make that.
Yeah. Another important thing about feeding is you must also be careful for contamination of your own honey. So you mustn't feed in a nectar flow because it could, I don't know, I could be speaking wrong, but it could contaminate your honey by mixing the syrup with the honey and then you are not producing honey. So it's also a lot to do with timing. In the middle of the blue gum season, you're not want to feed because then it's going to contaminate your honey with syrup. So it's, yeah.
So if you did happen to do that,
6 weeks before the honey flow to stimulate the queen.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's maybe important to say that.
Okay.
You don't want to feed when the honey flows on. You need them.
Prior. Yeah. And then, like Brenda mentioned now, 6 weeks prior to the honey flow. So a lot of times is for the stimulation feeding when the sun turns in the 21 June. That's about 6 weeks plus minus that you'll start before your spring flowers come up. So it's 6 weeks prior to your flow. So yeah, the solstice is quite a good time to work with. That's the wake up time is when the bees are the sun starts heating up and the queen is.
Then you start feeding.
Yes.
stimulation.
Yeah, because the queen because the queen has gone to.
From the time the queen lays the egg to the time that the bee becomes a field bee.
Yeah.
So you don't need to feed on a honey flow. You've got no benefit. You need to feed prior to have more bees in your box.
It's like now, soon.
Ja. 21 dae. Yeah, so the sun is, so that's interesting how the bees is with the sun, how as soon as the sun turns, how the bees start waking up, the days start getting longer, the queen starts laying eggs, the hive temperature increases to about 36, 38 degrees from a resting winter temperature. So yeah, and I think also talking about Brendan with removing the supers, I have to add is the more space you give your bees, the harder they have to work to keep the temperature of the hive warm, and means they're going to end up using more of their reserves. So if you confine their area to a smaller space, they're going to need to consume less energy, which is sucrose, to keep the hive warm. So it's better to also, that's why I'd say reduce it ends up needing less reserves in your box. Yeah.
So the question is, so that was feeding sugar, feeding protein supplement like pollen. What options do we have? And I know it's maybe not for winter because you want to stimulate brood production, which is more a spring thing. But what options do we have in terms of pollen stuff that we're feeding?
You can fill up it. I don't do that.
Pollen is protein, but it's quite a diverse amino acid makeup. It's not just a straight protein. Isn't just protein. Bees have specific needs of all the different amino acids in protein. So if you're going to do a pollen supplement, one wants to look at the facts behind it, what the bees require, and try and do a balanced pollen supplement or protein feed for the bees. You want to use products that are high in protein, so they're using soya flour quite successfully mixed with brewer's yeast. Those are two very high proteins, and then adding in the other essential amino acids. You can get them from other plant matter. There's a lot of information online on feeding pollen supplements. They use it extensively with great results overseas. There's a bee scientist, Randy Oliver. He's got a very, very nice calculator and a lot of information on feeding pollen supplements. So I'm very bad at repeating all the stuff that I've learned. I suggest you go and have a look at Randy Oliver's website. Can I add something else, Jeandré?
Yeah, please.
Are you finished?
Yeah, I don't have much more to say.
Okay, great. So, as we said, we need to use sucrose to feed the bees with why, because honey is basically sucrose. Honey is made from nectar, which the bees have inverted. Nectar is sucrose, and the bees invert it with the enzymes in their mouth and make it into glucose and fructose. And the same with sucrose is glucose and fructose. So it is the same. It's basically the same as honey using sugar. The effects of feeding the bees sugar is actually very good for the bees. It has a very low ash content, which means that it doesn't upset their stomachs, but it stimulates an enzyme in the bees which creates a hygienic function in the bees. The bees actually become healthier by being fed sugar syrup, believe it or not. It stimulates their immune system, so it's actually very good for the bees to feed them sugar syrup if they need it. That was the one thing I wanted to add on the sugar.
That's everything.
Yeah, so thick syrup 66%, thin syrup 43%. Yeah.
What are your opinions about things like fondant and sugar sweepings?
So Audrey contacted me a while back saying, my bees are hungry, and we had some WhatsApp back and forth. And she went to go feed her bees. Do you want to share what you did, Audrey?
I have discovered fondant and I'm in love. It's actually quite easy to make, and it's transportable, and it's pliable, and you can put this much in or you can put this much in.
What is fondant?
Fondant is sugar. It is like 300 mils of water to 1 kilo of sugar and 3 teaspoons of vinegar.
Like icing.
Patty with it.
You make a patty. It's like dough. It's like play kids patty.
Basically cake fondant.
Yeah, it's like cake fondant, but then you set it and you cut it into blocks. You wrap it into wax wrap, and then you can take it out to the field and you squish it a little bit flatter, and you put it in. And I tear the bottom off, the rest of it off, and I put it in there. And I feel like the most clever beekeeper ever, because my bees have food. I don't have to drive 2.5 hours to go feed them once a week. So fondant. Yeah, I can actually, yeah, I will do that. And I actually, somebody suggested on one of the groups that you add a pinch of pink salt, because they need the minerals, whatever. And sorry? Himalayan salt, yeah. And vitamin C powder, because they need some of the stuff in it, but natural, pure vitamin C powder, if you know. And I haven't done it with the first lot, but I'm definitely going to do it with the next lot. I'll put the recipe on there. It's actually so fun to make. I feel so clever. And it's so easy to work with.
Bernard?
Yes, hello.
So, me and Pete, we were busy fixing it out. Somebody delivered crab, to happy. And as we were moving the crab, there was a lot of things. There's water, enough water there. But the bees came up for these bees and the gravel.
All the minerals in there.
They just came there and they started, because it's winter, but it's something that you don't that was an experience when you see it there and it happens and you see the bees gathering and walking around with the gravel and
It's
I don't know what.
so they use it for propolis. So I've seen bees collect tar and plastic for propolis to use as propolis within the hive.
But you're talking about water.
Yeah, there is
The
water.
brown
You know, there's
water,
enough
stagnant
water around. But it was the gravel after the rain that had a bit of moisture. So
Yeah,
when they
minerals.
and we started moving it, and you see the bees all over the show. And then you ask yourself, what's up with the bees in the gravel now? You know, and then you must stop because just now you kill off too many bees.
Wasn't that because it rained? The gravel is not dry. It's wet.
Well, you could see they were, I don't know, but that looked like they were feeding and looking for something.
There's minerals, definitely. So it's quite cold and chilly, guys. Jeandré and myself, I think we've run out of things to share with you, but maybe as we have discussions, we'll go into different avenues. I know you all, especially the new guys here, want to get dressed and open hives, and Ahmad has said we can open his hive up there.
So thank you, Brendan and Jeandré, for the absolutely amazing talk that you've given us. We're going to have a break, coffee and some and muffins, and then Brendan can maybe have a look and see at the hive
Let's try and go through what we spoke
before we decide to open or not open.
Yes. Let's look at the obvious stuff that we talked about though, and look at how the hives are positioned.
Okay, yeah, we can do that either now or after we have a break.
Let's do it after the break.
After the break. So we'll have a break, like 15 minutes, and we can chat and everyone can grab a coffee there. The coffee does take a while, but there's enough time.
I mean, that's what it's all about, flowers, isn't it? It's not about the bees always. Without the flowers, the bees are going to do nothing. These guys are the kings, yeah. The beauties. But these are the bee flowers. The white ones and the pink ones. The compactor and the repens. There we go. There we go. There's a girl in there, there's another little girl.
There's a little girl in there too.
In this cold weather. But it's a capensis bee, it's evolved with this, it's used to this. If you give them this, they will work in these cold conditions.
She is dog.
So I thought it was quite important to come and have a look at what the bees are working on, that we don't just open hives. The handful of bread. But this is what it's about. I think it's engaging. So I just wanted to give my little bit of insight. You know, we always say fynbos, but not all fynbos is accessible to the bees. You know, some of it's for the long-tailed LBJ insects and so, but this is one of the most reliable nectar sources for the bees. These are Protea repens, and you get the pink one, which is a compactor. They're basically the same or sisters, and that's why you'll see the bees are working, because there's food for them here. They're very reliable for winter for the bees in the fynbos areas. If you're looking for bee sites, look for proteas like this. Not all proteas are even good for bees. A lot of the proteas give the bees nothing. But as we walked up here, we were looking in the flowers, and the bees in this cold weather were inside the proteas working them. So I thought it's quite nice to see, without the flowers, the bees can't do anything. So quite nice to look at the forage and not just look at the bees always. So maybe just take a moment and have a look in the flowers, walk up the row, see if you can see more flowers. we're not in a big rush to all run off and go home just yet, so we'll open a hive after this. So they keep them short because they want the young shoots. They don't want the woody stuff because they need to extract the oils out of it.
Well, these bees have already been harvested, so there's not.
They have harvested. Yeah, there's the one over there. Yeah, you're quite right. They've harvested most of them. Yeah, great. They make buchu honey. Yeah, it has long stalks with flowers on.
And the little white flowers. Like you see that little white flower?
There you go. There you go.
Smells lekker.
Yeah, good for your chest, huh? Good for medicine, that. Very good. If you everybody here. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much to Herman and Ahmad for organizing the hives. Herman brought the bees in last night with Ahmad, just so that especially for today. So, Herman, thank you, wherever you are. Is he here? Oh, there you are. Sorry. So, let's first start with the external observations. Before that, though, we were talking about being prepared before we come to the site, and being prepared means dressing properly. A lot of the times you can work the bees and you can work it in a jockey veil and your jeans, but come with your gloves, come with your boots, because when the shit hits the fan, you need them. So I want to teach responsible beekeeping. I got my gloves, I got my boots on, I got my veil, and wear the stuff, guys, use it. And obviously, your smoker, make sure you've got the right fuel, make sure it's not wet. At this time of the year, it's not going to smoke properly. If your smoker's not working properly, you can't work with the bees. So we were talking about externally. So when we walk up to the hives, what do we see first? We see the bees. What are they doing? Are the bees flying? Are they coming in with pollen? So Ahmed and I walked up here. We saw a little bit of pollen coming in on his hive. These hives only came last night, so the bees haven't properly got used to the area. They haven't orientated. But we can see already there's bees standing out front, which is good. They're not too weak. There's bees inside the hive. We can see there's a bit of a slope on the hive. You want the slope, as we spoke about, for the rain. We can see there's no stands for these hives. So these floorboards are sitting on the wet ground. The floorboards are going to absorb the moisture. They're going to be cold. They're going to be wet for the bees to walk on. And that cold will also come up into the hive a little bit. So we want to lift the hives off the ground. We want to have a look. Is there a lot of grass in front of the hives that the bees are flying into the wet grass? There's no wet grass. Positioning. This one is in the worst place here because it's in the shade of this tree. The sun's coming up that way. And they're in full afternoon shade. They've got no afternoon warmth coming there. Ideally, this one's a bit better because they've got full sunlight. That's what we want. We want full sunlight. Then we look at our equipment. Okay, can the rain get in from the top? Are the lids overlapping your super or nice and flush? Can the water go in through the cracks? I think they can maybe go in a little bit on these lids, but the bees will close it up with propolis. What else did we talk about? Slope. We've got a little bit of slope so the rain doesn't go in. Obviously, if it's tilting back, the rain's going to run in the floorboards. Lighting a smoker, guys. Basics, just to cover it for the new guys. To light your smoker, put a little bit of fuel in the bottom. we've got pine trees at home. I don't like, so we've got a lot of fuel for our smokers. Pine needles work really, really well for us. To light your smoker, a little fire in the bottom. Get the bottom burning nicely. Watch out for creating fires around you. Be responsible with your smoker. Get it going nicely. Your smoker must smoke. It mustn't just trickle a little bit of smoke out the top. We want it to smoke. So you've got the bottom going. Pack your pine needles in. Give it a couple of puffs. The reason this smoker works so well, it's the best smoker in the world. It's made by the Dant in the States. The Chinese ones don't always do this, but you want a smoker to work. You want smoke, right? Put on your protective gear. These are some veils that we are having made up in China, so we hope to be able to make them available to the beekeepers in a few months' time. They're really, really great, but we can discuss that at another time. Put your gloves on. I mean, I work without gloves a lot of the time, but put your gloves on. And oh, we're going to go to the hive, and it's really difficult to work bees with gloves on. There we go. So the bees can't get in there.
Where are those gloves from?
Builders, I think. Builders Warehouse, I think.
But, what size is that thing?
This one size fits all at Builders. Right, hive tool. Da-da-da. So when we come to the bees, before we touch the bees, we don't touch the hive. Firstly, we stand to the side because they're flying in and out of their entrance. We don't block their flight path. So we all stand to the side. Before we touch the hive, smoke. So we're going to give them, when you're starting, rather a bit more than too little, a few puffs in the entrance, and give it 30 seconds for the bees to circulate that smoke. This is your tool to working with bees without it becoming a shit show. It's fine, thank you. Herman's got straps on his hives, and they're different to my buckle, so I'm not as quick as that little demo I did earlier on, but it's the same story. There we go. Oh, that strap has got a little geitjie in it. There we go. Right, so now in this cold weather, the propolis is really hard. So we're just going to ease it gently. Don't bang the hive, be gentle with it. Don't hit the hive tool in and they're just feeling this jarring effect. Ease your hive tool in on one side, on the other. Okay, so we're going to look at how strong the colony is. That's the first thing we're going to do when we open a hive. So we look straight in. How many frames covered with bees?
Wow.
10 frames covered in bees plus. A little bit more smoke. Rather a little bit too much as you're starting with the bees than to... Right, so I forgot to do most important thing was to check the weight. What's the weight of the colony? It's not very heavy, but it's not light. I'm also seeing looks like they've been in a place where they've got some nectar. They've got a little bit of reserves there. And then the structure of the hive is, as I said, and Scylla and I were talking about that, they insulate themselves with honey. So we've got our outer frames going in, more honey on the outside going in. Strong colony like this, I would like to see about 5 frames full of honey, at least, to keep them alive in the cold weather. So the queen generally lives in the middle of the box because they need to have a warmer area and that honey keeps the warmth in. So we'll work from the outside. There's less chance of us damaging the queen. So normally we would pull the outer frame. I normally work from this side, but this top bar is pulled out because it's been worked in cold weather. But we want to ease the frames away from to make some space so that we don't squash the bees. And then we're going to ease the frame out. This one's broken, so I've got to be very, very careful. Actually going to take number 2 out. Can you see the bees are twitchy? They're not liking this cold weather. Use a little bit more smoke. Right, that first frame is damaged, so we're going to pull out the second frame. The bees are cold and sitting on the frame, so you can easily crush them. So you take it out slowly, creating space. What am I seeing? Lots of pollen. Not much nectar. Right? Now we can just have a quick look. When we don't want to take long here, we got a little repair job to do on this frame because the top bar has been pulled out, so we can quickly do a frame repair. Now, we talked about AFB. We don't normally do this inspection at this time of the year, but what we're going to look at for looking for AFB is we're going to look at the cap brood. Brood diseases you'll see in your brood, so you'll see it in your cap brood, and we'll inspect the brood for color differences and various other things you're going to learn at Silla's workshop, so I'm not going to cover it now and spoil the workshop. But if you are looking for diseases, you're going to check every frame with brood on it very quickly, because we don't want to make the bees cold. A very healthy hive, lots of brood. As you can see, big slabs of brood. Beautiful. AFB check. AFB check. Pop your combs back in, and so on through the colony. Most important that we're looking for is for food though. Have they got enough, reserves, not food. Yep, I'm not repairing, it's not my hives, I'm not repairing it. And we're just using it for demo. More important than the broken frame, how much brood is in here? Right. More brood. 4 frames of brood, beautiful, perfect for pollination. If you're wondering what this is drone brood. So these are the male bees here, as opposed to this brood here, which is the female bees in their cocoons. You can see quite, pardon? What? Well, if there's a nectar flow, the bees will be, if they are nice and strong, they want to reproduce, and drones are reproduction. So you see drones when there's...
Normal for this time of year.
It's all dictated by food, Louis. This is full of eggs here.
Last year this time we didn't have anything because it was very hot wet.
This is all eggs in here, so we've got 5 frames of brood. So a very strong colony for this time of the year. You won't normally find this, except in the fynbos areas. Another frame of brood, 6 frames of brood. This colony is going to need a super very soon, because 1 frame of brood is between 4,500 and 5,500 bees that are going to emerge. So we've got 6 frames of brood times 4. You've got 25,000 bees that are going to emerge over time. You need space for that. Right, and then we're looking for honey. So we've got 1 frame of honey. You can see that it's honey because firstly the weight, but also the capping on it. The brood capping is that browny color because those are cocoons, but honey, when it's capped, gets this a color and it goes darker and darker. So we've got nice 1 frame of honey, nice and heavy, and we've got another frame of honey on the outside here. 2 frames of honey. I was suggesting 5. This was a frame of foundation that they're still building out. You can see how they are how they're producing wax. They only produce wax on a nectar flow, so these bees are on a nectar flow. Very nice. Very nice. But I've only got 1 real frame of honey on this side. And we don't want to leave. I can smell the fynbos on this. Herman, this must have come out of fynbos. We don't want to work too long. And what we are trying to do is to be very gentle. We're not trying to squash bees. We're trying to do this all gently. So we're counting honey. This is pollen, but this is quite a lot of nectar in here also, and honey. So we've got about 2 frames, maybe 2.5 frames full of full of stores of honey, and we're going to have 25,000 bees, and if they are stuck in the hive for an extended period of time, they're going to die from starvation. So that's a quick inspection. Shouldn't take you more than 4 or 5 minutes. We just pinch all our frames up together again. As you can see, the bees are twitchy with me. And my smoker's died in the meantime, talking too much. Use a little bit of smoke, guys. Use a little bit of smoke. This is your tool to keep your bees a bit more mellow. Closing our boxes, we want to close them so that they don't leak. We want to push our frames in nicely. So with this, what we would not typically do is we will clean off all this mess on the side. Okay, all the way round, all the way round, and the same on your lid. Okay, let's just pretend this is propolis. We're just getting all the propolis off. Okay.
Herman, you're going to have to bring an element to seal up again.
And if we get it all off and we've got a flat surface and we pull the lid tight, it will seal beautifully. Herman has left out wax foundation. We're not going to put it in. Typically the way I work, because rather ideally we want to put in 2 frames of wax foundation every year. And we want to get all the shit frames out of here because we want to create a beautiful laying area for the queen. So now you're like, where do I put these things? What do I do? How do I do it? So I've got a system that I use that works for me, that I don't have to think because I'm working with staff and we all need to be on the same page. So every year I take out frame number 9 and 10 over here and I'll shift my whole brood nest across and I'll put in these 2 foundations because we'll have a gap here because we've taken that out. I'll put in the 2 sheets of foundation here at number 2 and number 3 position. And then next year I'll be taking out another 2. These 2 will be pushed to the middle and your new 2 come to number 2 and 3 again. So over a 5-year period, these are being pushed through. And what we're trying to achieve is the perfect comb for the queen to lay on.
So number 1, you're not really phased with circulating, putting out of circulation until maybe...
It's a long-term project. It's a long-term project doing that. These frames aren't sitting deep enough. That's why the use of silicon, that's why Herman used silicon on here.
Is it a good idea to use the silicon?
Silicon is perfect for sealing hives. Works very, very well.
2 frames on the side here, you push the whole lot across. Those ones that had fallen in it, you put in that.
Just push them. Don't think. The bees will eat it. The bees will eat the pollen and the nectar. Don't think about that. Think about having perfect combs for the queen to live on. It's a long-term project. It's not, you're not going to fix this in a year, get all your shit out and put in nice frames. So every year we'll take out 2, put in 2. 2 out over a long period. You end up with a very, very nice brood nest. The queen can lay more worker bees and you don't have the drone comb that's taking up half your frame. Doesn't matter if your outer frames have got the drone comb on it, because they're normally storing pollen and honey in that. But your middle of your brood nest, you want to give them perfect combs, and it comes from full sheets of foundation, not strips. Strips are great, they're cheap, it's easy to catch bees with them, but your goal is to have perfect comb, and the only way to get perfect comb is to give them a perfect foundation. Yes.
So if you put it in the middle, and you work it to the side, it's better to put it in the side before it's in the middle.
You don't ever put foundation in the middle of your nest because you split your brood up and you create a cold space. And you break the communication. You never ever put foundation in the middle of your brood or in the middle of your nest. Put it to the side. Next year, that beautiful comb is going to go in, and the next year you're going to put in more foundation. So it's not necessary to put it in the middle. So now we want to close the hive, and there's all these bees in the way, so we'll just use a little smoke. And we'll just use a little smoke on these. If we can't get rid of the bees, we can also just pop them out here. Now we can close the lid without hurting the bees. Okay, we can put our strap on. And here we go. And we can put your knee on the edge here just to jam it, and use the Zulu tool to pull it tight. It's already tight. If you want it really tight, use that lovely tool I showed you. These bees will all go in, but don't shake the bees out over there, especially when it's cold. They're not going to walk back in. They're going to get cold feet and get cold, and they're going to sit. Okay, so that is the basics of what we spoke about. Not enough honey in here or reserves in here if they not in a place where there's food coming in, like beautiful proteas or fynbos or ramnas or other things that flower at this time of the year.
But will these bees be okay now with the protea?
These bees are only here for the demonstration. But yes, in theory they will be very happy. If you look at Ahmad's hive, we're going to go there and have a quick look. It's actually warmed up a little bit, I think. So it's fine for us to open them up. In the mountainous areas, the fynbos is good for the bees, but unreliable sometimes. It's not reliable for sustaining. So you need to check. What's the weight? Have a look inside if you're unsure, and see how many frames you got covered with honey. Now, so this is Herman. He's running these for commercial pollination. It's different. Let's have a look at Ahmad's. He's got stationary hives in one place that don't move. Okay, you guys can come a bit closer. We don't need to stand there. They're not going to jump on you. The bees look quite mellow. Just stand to the side.
Did you manage to spot the queen in that?
I didn't look for her. I don't look for the queen. What I do look for is I look for a brood. As long as I'm seeing brood, I don't need to see the queen actually. If I'm not seeing brood, then I can start to be more curious. But we don't need to actually see the queen. I know everybody wants to see the queen, but more important is, what is she doing? Is she laying big patterns of brood? Are there eggs? That sort of stuff. Right, so this is Ahmad's hive. We can see there's a difference. That one had a lot of bees at the entrance. I'm not seeing much here. These bees stay up all year round, but we are seeing some bees. Hive is sloping, it's off the ground. First things first, smoke. Now you can't smoke bees like this. This smoker's not working. Get your smoker working properly. Okay, now the smoker's working. That's how you want to work with bees. This is your tool. So one of your most important tools with working with bees. So before we touch the box, before we stomp on the ground, the bees are so sensitive they can pick it up. Just give them a few nice puffs of smoke. Let them circulate it. You can take this little weight off the lid because that is there to stop them blowing over. Let's get this nice little strap off. There we go. A very nice strap for the hive. I'm just not so familiar with using these. There we go. Right, always gentle, guys. No banging. Just gently ease the equipment apart. This is a lovely lid because it takes the rain right off the hive. It can't go under the migratory lids that I use and Herman and Jeandré. So gently remove it, put it down. I often like to put it in front of the hive, then I can put my stuff on it. This is an inner lid. So this has got very poor insulation, but because we've got this thick outer lid, then it creates this little cavity here. It's lovely insulation for the bees. Once again, it's all glued together, so just gently ease it up, otherwise it breaks. Gently, gently. Look at that colony. Beautiful, 10 frames of bees. We can put our lid on the front and the bees can walk back in if they want to. I didn't check the weight because I was so busy chatting. Weight is similar to Herman's. I would like a bit more weight than that. Once.
Do you estimate the weight in pages?
Say again?
How much do you estimate kilogram-wise that weight should be?
I don't know. It's more just the feeling in my hand. I don't know what the weight is. An empty beehive weighs, with a super on it, weighs 24.5 kilos.
Okay.
So it must weigh. It's got bees in and honey in it. So the first thing I see here, there's only 9 frames in here. So we want to, on one of the inspections, know that we need to add another frame. But that's not important. That's not important. But there is space for another frame, which means space for another. There we go. The other thing I'm seeing, just looking from the top, is that I'm seeing that these combs, this came from a catch hive. The combs, the bees have built them a bit crooked. So we might struggle, and we're going to just gently see if we can get in here without causing too much problems. It's braced across there. I'm not going to pull that out. That's tricky, and that's tricky. So, ideally, if I was going to put frames in this hive, for example, it's different to that one because I got this shit here. So I would maybe take my frames out from this side instead of at 9 and 10 and push this shitty one to the outside and put my 2 frames still at number 2 and 3. And then next year you can carry on with the routine. So, very gently, with a bit of luck, we can ease out this whole pack. We've got problems here. We've got problems. But what are we basically looking for is reserves. How much reserves have they got? If we're going to look in the hive, if the weight isn't enough to tell us. These are not brood frames. I didn't expect that. These are super frames from a catch hive. You can see they're in very poor condition. We want to get these frames out of the hive with time and create perfect combs. This is perfect to demonstrate because we want to see where we can improve.
Normally with catch hives.
Catch boxes. That's what I was saying. This is a catch hive, exactly. So sometimes that's all that you've got. So look at the poor condition of this comb. We're seeing brood. We're seeing drone brood. We're seeing more eggs here. We're seeing pollen. But can you imagine if this was one sheet that was all the perfect size for the queen? We wouldn't have. She would be able to fill it with brood. And
Strange laying pattern because it's very dense and capped over here and then just open there. So it's almost like it's a last resort.
No, the bees emerged from this. The older bees came out of this piece of comb, and the queen is going to lay in there or has laid in there. So that's why it's empty there. It's because the comb is in poor condition. So we want to get these shitty combs out. That's what part of our management is. Not the right time of the year, but while we're in here, I'm just talking about general beekeeping.
Pollen is beautiful.
Beautiful color pollen.
So like luminous.
Beautiful, beautiful. Nice strong hive. Just have to be very careful. Yes.
follow your 2-frame replacement, or would you tackle it with
I would try and get this out. I might put 3 frames in. You have to be flexible with all of these rules. You can't just stick to the rule. But as a general rule, I put in 2 frames at position 2 and 3, and I take out 2 on that side. But it's not always, that's in the ideal situation. Okay, so we're not really interested in the brood that much, apart from for diseases. If you're going to look, I'm not seeing anything on that first frame. This colony, I don't want to mess with it. It needs work in the bottom, and it's too cold for that. But what I do see in the bottom is lots of honey in this mess of the comb. So that's very nice for the bees. See here. Yeah. So
Why would you put those frames in there in the first place?
there you go. You're going to have to pay Ahmad for that, huh? What do you charge per gram?
You tell them if they catch bees, they must always inspect the hives, because obviously it's only strips and then they make a mess. So as soon as you see you've got bees in a catch hive, you should give them full sheet.
You take out your strips that aren't being used, you push your colony to the far side wall, and you put in full sheets.
And then you'll avoid that.
And then you avoid this. That's in the ideal world. It doesn't always work because your catch hives are in
Remote places.
Piketberg and you stay in Musenberg.
We've been putting in half sheets, wax.
But this has got some weight if anybody wants to feel. This is what you want to feel. Just gently on the side there. There we go. So you can feel there's weight in there.
2.5, 3 kilos.
Yeah, there we go. So a colony like this, you want to have quite a bit though. So we need to ease this in very, very gently. We don't want to squash the bees. Okay, what I like to normally do is I like to compress the frames up against each other, but I can't get in here. But just to put your hive tool in slowly. Very slowly, we don't squash the bees. And we push the frames up.
So if you're going to find yourself in a 9-frame situation, you want to just keep it an even gap on either side.
We'll clean the propolis off. If you want to really clean the propolis off because it's really tough, you use the back of your hive tool and we'll just clean it off. Okay, this propolis is nice and soft. Fynbos propolis is different to other propolis. The same with the Dexel. Shake the bees off gently. We'll just clean off this propolis. There we go, we can give it back to the bees. Propolis is very, very important in the hive, so don't feel you have to remove it. Keeps the hive hygienic because bees have got a very poorly evolved immune system. Right, so as far as food stores go, they're not far off for winter. But Ahmad will keep an eye on them and just check the weight when he comes again in a month's time. Now, gently drop your lid on. If you can't drop the lid on gently, and you're scared you're going to squash the bees, just a little smoke, and you'll see the bees will run down between the frames. They'll move out of the way. We can close the hive. Here we go. Put your clip back on the hive. Put your strap back on. Who knows these straps?
Leave the strap, is fine. Leave the strap, I'll sort it out. Just put it down. It's fine. Thank you.
So there were no bee diseases. There was quite a bit of honey and nectar in here. There was a big mess in here. In your book that you write, your notes, you write, hang on, I'm short 1 frame. I need to do this, this, and this. So that's our hive inspections. I hope I've covered a few of the important things, guys. Anything anybody would like to add?
Can we go taste Ahmad's honey now?
What's really good if you move them short distances is you put lots of branches on top of the hive. slows the bees and they come out and then they reorientate.
They forced to reorientate. Yeah.
What I did want to say though is these bees are like pussycats. They are so relaxed and mellow. This is not aggression. This is just normal bee activity. They can be so fierce. And one has to always prepare for the worst. Then think, oh, the bees are going to be mellow, and you get here and they're not, and they, you know, the farm guy has to drive his tractor up here and the bees are going crazy and the farmer says, take your bees, bye-bye. And, you know, possible animals, there's dogs over the fence that are caught in a small garden, they can't escape, they're getting stung to death. So all of these little considerations when we're working the bees, to do it responsibly for the whole environment.
I think you could see a vast difference between this colony and the one you worked on first.
Yes. Not in strength, but in the
in the attitude and the behavior, the temperament.
Last night we were like, what the hell? I just got you and now you're expecting me. That's all, I think.
Give a bee a break.
Yeah, I'm afraid.
The last thing I want to say, just before I keep quiet, is this is a fire risk. When you put it in your van, in your bakkie, put a cork in the top of it so that the smoke can't come out and it'll die. Or a piece of sponge or something so that it dies. Put it in a safe place. Don't put it next to your pine needles in the back of your car or bakkie. I've set my own bakkie alight. I've learnt a lot of things the hard way. So I'm trying to teach you guys so that you don't have to learn the hard way. But I've finished with what apart from questions, that we can walk down and leave the girls to recover from this horrible inspection in this cold weather. Thanks for the bees, Ahmad. Herman, thanks for the bees.